The heavy bag swung beneath my fists as every punch echoed through Lou's gym, rattling the exposed pipes overhead. Sweat soaked my grey t-shirt and blood had already seeped through the wraps around my knuckles, but I didn't stop. Pain was simple. Suspicion wasn't. You planning to kill that bag? Lou called from behind the counter. Or are you waiting for it to apologize? I let my arms drop. At 72, Lou had the gravelly voice of a man who'd spent a lifetime fighting, smoking, and surviving enough bad decisions to recognize another one before it happened. I peeled the tape from my hands. Just thinking. Dangerous habit. Ain't tossed me a towel. My name is Danielle Mercer. I'm 42, and I own Mercer Auto Works. Until 3 months ago, I believed hard work could fix almost anything. Cars were honest. A bad bearing rattled, a failing alternator whined, and a cracked hose leaked where everyone could see it. People weren't built that way. They could come apart in complete silence. My phone buzzed. A text from my 16-year-old daughter, Maddie. Dad made pot roast. He says you're probably too busy to come home anyway. I read it twice. Adrian knew I wasn't too busy. I'd started staying late because coming home felt like walking into the middle of an argument no one had bothered to tell me about. Over the past few months, he'd grown distant, answering every question with a word or two before disappearing into his phone. At first, I blamed stress, then exhaustion. Eventually, I blamed myself. Lou studied my face. Go home, Danny. I have work. You have 8 employees. They'll survive without you for one evening. You counting my staff now? I'm counting excuses. Before I could answer, he'd already turned away. 20 minutes later, I was driving through our quiet New England neighborhood, wondering when home had started feeling less welcoming than the shop. Adrian and I had never married. We always said we didn't need paperwork, then life got in the way. Maddie was born, the business grew, and conversations about rings quietly disappeared. The house was mine. I'd bought it 11 years earlier and rebuilt most of it myself. Adrian picked the furniture, the curtains, and the pale blue kitchen walls. I built the house. He used to make it feel like home. The kitchen light was already on when I pulled into the driveway. 3 shadows moved behind the window. Maddie, Adrian, and Vanessa Cole, Adrian's high school girlfriend. I stayed in the truck for a moment, watching Vanessa laugh while Adrian brushed a hand across her shoulder. The touch lasted barely a second, yet it was more affection than he'd shown me all week. Before I could get out, the front door opened. Mom! Maddie ran down the steps in her socks and hugged me. You're home early. Apparently. She smiled. Dad invited Vanessa for dinner. She's opening another dealership and he's helping with the contracts. So that was the complicated client, whose evening calls always ended with him smiling. Inside, the kitchen smelled of rosemary and red wine. Adrian had made his famous pot roast, a meal he usually saved for birthdays and Christmas. Vanessa stood from my chair and offered a manicured hand. Danielle, it's been forever. Not long enough. Her smile stiffened. Adrian stepped beside her. Danny, don't start. I just walked into my own kitchen. And you're already looking for a fight. Vanessa withdrew her hand with a polite laugh. I've heard so much about your little garage. It's an automotive repair company, I said evenly. We employ 8 people. Of course, she raised her wine glass. Adrian says business has been going well. Adrian says. I took my seat while Vanessa settled comfortably beside him, close enough that their elbows nearly touched. Maddie chatted about school, but I barely heard her. I was too busy noticing how Vanessa finished Adrian's sentences, how he already knew she hated carrots, and how naturally he refilled her wine without asking. None of it proved they were having an affair. Together, though, it sounded like a conversation they'd been having long before I walked into the room. Vanessa spent dinner talking about investors, expansion plans, and luxury partnerships without mentioning a single number. By the time she finally left, Adrian insisted on walking her to the door. She kissed Adrian's cheek before leaving, her hand lingering against his chest as she whispered something that made him smile. I waited until the front door closed. She seems awfully comfortable here. Adrian carried the plates to the sink without looking at me. She's an old friend. She was sitting in my chair. You weren't supposed to be home. The words slipped out before he could stop them. I stared at him. Why did you think I wouldn't be? You always work late. You could have called. So you could tell me another transmission was more important. Maddie looked between us, sighed, and headed upstairs. I'm going to my room. The moment her bedroom door shut, Adrian dropped the dishes into the sink with a loud clatter. I just wanted some company. You invited your ex. She's a client. In our kitchen? For the dinner you used to save for my birthday? His jaw tightened. When was the last time you noticed anything I did? That doesn't answer my question. No, but maybe you'll answer mine. You come home talking about payroll, suppliers, mortgages, and college savings, then disappear into the shower. You never ask how I am. I thought building a stable life was what we both wanted. You confused paying the bills with loving me. The words stung because part of them were true. Somewhere between expanding the shop and raising our daughter, we'd become efficient partners instead of a couple. But distance didn't explain lies. It didn't explain Vanessa. So you invited her here to fix us? She's someone I've known for years. Then look me in the eye. Hank couldn't. That night, he slept with his back to me while I lay awake watching the clock creep toward morning, wondering how long someone could quietly plan to leave before the person beside them noticed. I got my answer the next day. I was underneath Mrs. Peterson's Honda when my phone rang. It was Janet Hayes. Adrian's mother almost never called during the work hours. Everything all right? No, she said quietly. We need to talk about Adrian and Vanessa. The wrench slipped from my hand. What about them? He's been bringing her to the house while you're at work. How long? At least 3 months. My throat tightened. Why tell me now? Because I warned him to stop. He laughed and said you wouldn't understand what he needed. 3 months. Every late meeting, every locked phone, every time he told Maddie I cared more about engines than my own family suddenly fit together. If he mentions Vanessa again, I said, call me. She hesitated. I think he's planning something. What? I don't know yet. 2 days later, she called again. He's hosting dinner tomorrow. With who? Both families. You, your parents, me, Maddie, and Vanessa. Did he say why? He only said he had important news. As I watched my employees close the service bays for the evening, everything became clear. Adrian wasn't planning to leave quietly. I wanted an audience. I wanted both families sitting around my table while he announced he'd chosen someone else. I need one favor, I told Janet. What is it? Let him start. The following evening, I parked 3 streets away and watched through the kitchen window as Adrian lit candles and arranged the good china. Vanessa arrived carrying flowers, a bottle of wine, and a neatly wrapped gift, smiling as though she already belonged there. My parents arrived a few minutes before Janet. No one had set a place for me. At exactly 7:30, Adrian rose with a wine glass in his hand while Vanessa smiled up at him. That was when I opened the front door. Conversation died the instant I stepped into the dining room. Sorry I'm late, I said. Boston traffic was worse than I expected. The color drained from Adrian's face. I pulled an empty chair from the wall, placed it between my father and Maddie, and smiled. Don't let me interrupt. Adrian, you looked like you were about to make an important announcement. The only sound came from the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. You weren't supposed to be back until tomorrow, Adrian finally said. That's the funny thing about surprises. My mother frowned. Danielle, what's happening? I was hoping Adrian would explain. Vanessa sat perfectly still, the bouquet she'd brought resting in the middle of my dining table like she already belonged there. Dad quietly pulled out the chair beside him. Sit down, sweetheart. I did, noticing mine was the only place without a plate. I didn't know you were coming, Adrian muttered. You live with me. His jaw tightened. Trying to regain control, he forced a smile. This was supposed to be a peaceful dinner. With your ex and both our families? Vanessa's here because she's part of what I need to discuss. She shot him a warning glance. Too late. Dad? Maddie asked quietly. What's going on? For the first time that night, Adrian hesitated. His plan had depended on my absence. Without me there, he could have painted me as the work-obsessed partner who'd driven him away while presenting Vanessa as the woman who finally understood him. Instead, I was sitting across the table. Go ahead, I said. Tell them. This isn't the right time. You picked the time. My father leaned forward. Adrian, why are we all here? Before he could answer, Janet spoke. Because my son planned to tell everyone he was leaving Danielle. The room fell silent. What? Maddie whispered. Mom, Adrian snapped. Please stay out of this. I stayed out of it for 3 months, Janet replied calmly. That was my mistake. Vanessa pushed back her chair. I don't think I should be here. You're exactly where you wanted to be. She froze. This has gotten out of hand, Adrian said. No, Janet answered. It's finally honest. She turned to me with quiet regret. Adrian kept saying you worked too much, never appreciated him, and made him feel invisible. I nodded. I'd heard pieces of that before. Then Janet delivered the part I'd never known. He also said you embarrassed him. He was tired of bringing a woman who smelled like motor oil to firm events. He thought he deserved someone with more class. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Dad slowly turned toward Adrian, while Maddie stared at him as though she no longer recognized the man sitting across from her. I did. That was the painful part. Looking back, the signs had been there all along. Adrian corrected my grammar in front of colleagues, introduced me as someone who worked with cars, instead of saying I owned the largest independent repair shop in the county, and disguised his embarrassment as harmless jokes. A mechanic? I asked quietly. That's what you were ashamed of? He rubbed a hand across his face. I was frustrated. For 3 months? You were never there. I was working. You were always working. To support this family. I have a job too. Yes, And when Maddie needed braces, the roof leaked, or your mother's furnace failed, whose paycheck covered it? His expression hardened. So now you're keeping score? No, I'm finally seeing the whole picture. Vanessa rose from her chair. This is between the two of you. I turned to her. You accepted dinner in my home, let my partner plan our breakup in front of our daughter, and sat here pretending you had nothing to do with it. You made it your business the moment you walked through my front door. A faint flush crept across her face. Adrian stepped toward me. Danny, stop attacking everyone. I haven't even started. He'd expected tears or shouting, something he could point to as proof that I'd always been unreasonable. Instead, I unlocked my phone. Before Adrian finishes his announcement, there's something everyone should see. His face went pale. Don't. Ignoring him, I placed my phone in the middle of the table. The first photo showed Adrian embracing Vanessa beside her silver Mercedes outside the Riverside Motor Lodge. The second showed them kissing. The third captured them walking into room 214 together. No one spoke. Maddie turned away. My mother burst into tears and my father lurched to his feet before I caught his arm. No, Danielle. I said no. Adrian stared at the screen as though seeing it for the first time. You followed me. I followed you after you claimed you were working late on a deposition. You invaded my privacy. You lied. That doesn't give you the right. Then explain the motel. Silence answered for him. Vanessa folded her arms. We were talking. In a motel room. The dealership wasn't private. My father let out a bitter laugh. I swiped to the next image. 2 hours later, Adrian and Vanessa were leaving the motel together. His shirt was untucked. Her hair was a mess. No explanation was necessary. Maddie shoved back her chair. I don't want to see this. I turned the phone over immediately. You shouldn't have had to. She looked straight at her father. Were you really going to tell us tonight? He swallowed hard. Maddie, it's complicated. No, it isn't. Her voice broke. You were leaving Mom for her. I was trying to explain that your mother and I haven't been happy. Then why was Vanessa here? He opened his mouth but couldn't answer. Vanessa grabbed her purse. I'm leaving. Not yet. She stopped. You don't get to tell me what to do. No, but before you walk out, Adrian deserves to hear the part you conveniently left out. He frowned. What is she talking about? I looked at Vanessa one last time. You can tell him yourself, or I will. For the first time that evening, every trace of confidence disappeared from her face. I unlocked my phone again. Morrison Cole Motors is 3 months behind on its commercial rent. The bank filed notices on 2 delinquent business loans just last month. The second dealership doesn't even exist, I said. The first one is barely staying afloat. The color drained from Vanessa's face. Where did you get that? Public court records. Adrian turned to her, disbelief replacing anger. You told me the expansion was already funded. It will be. With what? She hesitated. I don't owe anyone an explanation about my business. You made it everyone's business, I said. You convinced Adrian you were successful and let him believe he was walking away from me into something better. That isn't why we're together. Adrian stared at her. Together? The word slipped out before she could stop it. Maddie began crying. It was the first sound that truly broke the room. I looked at Adrian. You wanted a different life. Fine. But before you destroy this one, you should know what you're actually choosing. Then I reached into my bag. I met with an attorney yesterday. The house is in my name, and I built Mercer Auto Works years before we ever lived together. Unless you can prove you invested in either, you don't own any part of them. His face hardened. You're throwing me out. No, I'm reminding you that the future you imagined was built on things that were never yours. You're trying to punish me. I'm protecting what I earned. Vanessa reached for his arm. He pulled away without thinking. The tiny gesture said more than either of them could. You're serious? She asked. You lied to me. Her laugh was brittle. You were about to leave Danielle, and this is what you're upset about. I thought you had a plan. I thought you had equity. Silence settled over the table as Adrian finally understood. You said you loved me. I said we could build a life together. With Danielle's assets, Janet said quietly. Vanessa grabbed her coat. This is ridiculous. No one stopped her. A moment later, her car roared out of the driveway, leaving Adrian staring at the empty doorway she'd disappeared through. He'd spent months planning to replace me, only to discover the woman he'd chosen had been counting property that belonged to someone else. I stood. You still have an announcement to make? He looked at me, every trace of confidence gone. Danny, can we talk alone? No, please. You wanted everyone here. I glanced around the table at my parents, Janet, and our daughter. Now they can hear the ending too. The house felt hollow after everyone left. The candle still burned beside untouched wine glasses, and my mother's apple pie remained wrapped in foil where she'd left it. I poured Vanessa's untouched wine into the sink and watched it disappear down the drain before heading to bed. The next morning, I unlocked Mercer Auto Works at 6:30, exactly as I had for nearly 15 years. The smell of oil, steel, and fresh coffee steadied me in a way nothing else could. Machines failed for a reason. People usually hid theirs. By mid-morning, the entire shop sensed something had happened, though no one asked. Lou eventually walked in carrying 2 coffees. I figured you forgot breakfast. I forgot more than that. He leaned against a toolbox. Janet stopped by. I figured. She said you handled yourself. I gave a tired laugh. It didn't feel that way. The truth rarely does. After a moment, he asked the question I'd been avoiding. So, what now? I didn't have an answer. I hadn't won. I'd simply stopped pretending everything was fine. Around noon, my attorney called. Danielle, Tom Bradley said, I've got good news and bad. Bad first. Adrian retained Henderson and Associates this morning. They're preparing to argue that your long work hours make you the less available parent. I tightened my grip on the phone. I never missed a parent-teacher conference. I coached Maddie's robotics team. I answered every emergency call from school. I know, Tom said. They're building a story. And the good news? Our investigator already dismantled most of it. How? Everything Adrian voluntarily backed up to your shared family account. I frowned. Phone records. Messages, photos, calendar entries, and location history, Tom replied. Everything came from the shared family account you both authorized years ago. Completely legal. A moment later, screenshots landed in my inbox. Vanessa. Dinner again tomorrow. Adrian. She'll still be at the shop after 8. Another. Vanessa. When are you finally leaving? Adrian. Soon. I'm waiting for the right moment. Then another. Vanessa. Does Danielle suspect anything? Adrian. She's married to her business. She barely notices me anymore. That one lingered. The last exchange hurt even more. Vanessa. Do you think she'll fight over the house? Adrian. Eventually she'll calm down. She's practical. Practical. To Adrian, I wasn't a partner anymore. I was someone predictable. Someone he believed would quietly accept betrayal because I always chose peace over conflict. Tom broke the silence. There's something else. What? You need to see Vanessa. Why? If Adrian still believes she's financially secure, he probably thinks leaving was worth it. You think she's lying? I don't think, Tom said. I verified. 40 minutes later, I pulled into Morrison Cole Motors. From the road, it looked successful. Up close, the illusion fell apart. Dust covered half the inventory, the fountain sat dry and full of dead leaves, and most of the showroom lights were off. Inside, Vanessa was ending a tense phone call. I said next Friday, no, don't send another notice. She looked up and froze. What are you doing here? I came to congratulate you. For what? You almost convinced Adrian. She folded her arms, offering a polished smile that didn't reach her eyes. Our relationship was over long before I came back. I ignored the line. Do you really love him? Yes. Would you still love him if he walked away with nothing? She blinked. What? No house, no business, no savings. For the first time, she didn't answer immediately. The hesitation lasted only a couple of seconds, but it told me everything. That's a strange question. Not really. I stepped closer. The house is mine. Mercer Auto Works is mine. Every investment account is mine. Adrian isn't leaving with any of it. Her smile disappeared. You're trying to intimidate me. No. I held her gaze. I'm trying to save you from discovering too late that the future you imagined doesn't exist. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? If you're planning a future with Adrian because you think he's financially secure, I said, sliding a folder across the desk. Read this first. She hesitated before opening it. Inside were nothing but public records, property filings, commercial liens, late payment notices, and court documents anyone could have requested. As she flipped through the pages, the confidence slowly drained from her face. This can't be right. It is. She kept reading until her hand stopped halfway through the file. He told me the house belonged to both of you. It doesn't. He said he helped build the business. He spent exactly 3 Saturdays at the shop. She looked up, genuinely shaken. He also said, I know exactly what he told you. For the first time since I'd walked in, the confidence she'd been wearing slipped away. Does Adrian know any of this? He does now. She glanced back at the documents. So he lied to me too. Neither of us spoke until she quietly closed the folder. I need time to think. I thought you might. As I reached the door, she stopped me. If neither of you is walking away with the other's money, what exactly am I getting? I met her eyes. A man who lied to both of us. That evening, Maddie called. Her voice was so small I knew she'd been crying. Mom, I'm here. Dad says you're trying to destroy him. I closed my office door. What do you think? She didn't answer right away. I don't know anymore. There was no anger in her voice, only confusion. I keep thinking about dinner, she whispered. Did Dad really mean those things? Outside my office window, my mechanics laughed while finishing a transmission, the easy trust between them reminding me what honest work looked like. I don't know what was in his heart, I said. I only know what he chose to say. Another long silence followed. Are we still a family? The question hit harder than everything that had happened that week. I'll always be your mother, I said. I'll always love you. Whatever happens between your father and me will never change that. She broke down. I don't want to choose. You won't have to. I promise. After we hung up, I stayed alone in my office until the parking lot lights flickered on. For weeks, I'd been asking myself whether Adrian had ever loved me. I finally realized it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was whether he'd tell the truth before it caught up with him. 3 days later, Adrian came back. Not because he missed me, because reality had finally caught up with him. I was repairing the hinges on the back gate when his SUV rolled into the driveway. Gone was the polished attorney in tailored suits. He climbed out in jeans and a wrinkled sweater, looking older than his 42 years. I knocked. I heard. You wouldn't answer. I wasn't ready. For a moment, neither of us moved. Dry October leaves skittered across the driveway until he finally broke the silence. We need to talk. About Maddie. He nodded. Everything was suddenly about Maddie. Not because he'd finally understood what he'd done to her, but because it sounded nobler than admitting he wanted something for himself. I tossed the wrench onto the workbench. Come inside. The kitchen felt strangely empty, with only the two of us. I ended things with Vanessa. I know. His eyes narrowed. How? She paid a visit to the courthouse. Realization crossed his face. You talked to her. I answered the questions she should have asked before helping you destroy our family. He lowered his head. I made a mistake. You made a plan. He flinched. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. You lied for months, invited both families, rehearsed a speech, and even forgot to set a place for me. That wasn't an accident. His shoulders sagged. I wasn't happy. I know. I felt invisible. I saw it. I just didn't know why. I kept hoping you'd notice. I noticed. I didn't know you'd already given up. The calmness unsettled him more than anger ever could. I never wanted this. You scheduled it. Silence stretched between us before he whispered, I deserve that. No, I said. You deserve honesty. After a long pause, he asked, when did you stop trusting me? The second lie. He closed his eyes. I should have told you. You should have left before you cheated. He nodded. Is there any chance for us? I wrapped both hands around my coffee mug. I don't know. Hope flickered across his face. So, maybe. I shook my head. I don't know isn't hope. It means I haven't decided whether there's anything left worth saving. He opened his briefcase and slid a folder toward me. My financial records. Inside were his bank statements, retirement accounts, tax returns, and investment records. One figure stood out immediately. His savings were nowhere near what they should have been. You've been giving Vanessa money. He lowered his eyes. I loaned her about $80,000 over 2 years. I stared at him. Our emergency fund? He nodded. The brokerage account. Another nod. The cabin renovation fund. His silence answered. Suddenly, every postponed vacation and every excuse about unexpected expenses made sense. While I worked overtime building our future, Adrian had been quietly paying for someone else's. I've already spoken with Tom Bradley, I said, sliding another envelope across the table. This is a proposed separation agreement. He stared at it before opening the packet. The terms were simple. The house remained mine. Mercer Auto Works remained mine. Neither of us demanded more than the law allowed. Most importantly, Maddie came first. Joint legal custody, shared parenting time, flexible holidays, and family therapy. I looked up, genuinely surprised. I thought you'd fight to keep her from me. I won't punish our daughter because you failed me. His eyes filled. I don't deserve that. This isn't about what you deserve. It's about what Maddie deserves. He turned another page. You're not asking for support. We both earn enough. You don't want anything? I want peace. He let out a tired breath. Henderson will tell me not to sign. They'll tell you to spend another $50,000 fighting over things neither of us actually wants. A faint, humorless smile crossed his face before disappearing. They hired a private investigator. I know. His head lifted. You know, he's been parked across from the shop twice. He'll interview your employees. They're free to tell the truth. He rubbed his forehead. I never meant for them to come after you. But you let it happen. He couldn't argue. I was desperate. You'd already lost everything before the lawyers got involved. That evening, Tom called with another update. The investigator found nothing, he said, but he did speak with Vanessa. What happened? The moment she realized Adrian doesn't own your business, she panicked. By the end of the day, she'd contacted 2 bankruptcy attorneys. I let out a quiet breath. So she finally understands. She understands exactly what Adrian actually brought into that relationship. The next afternoon, Maddie stopped by the shop. "I talked to Dad," she said after hugging me. "And?" He cried. He said he still loves you, then asked if someone can destroy everything and still fix it. Across the shop, my mechanics were rebuilding a transmission. Some parts could be repaired, some had to be replaced, and some looked perfectly fine until they were taken apart. "I honestly don't know," I said. "But nothing gets fixed until the person who broke it admits it's broken." She nodded without another word. That night, I drove to the lakeside cabin Adrian and I had once planned to retire in. Standing on the porch, I sent a single message. "Come to the cabin Saturday. No lawyers, no family, just the truth." His reply arrived less than a minute later. "I'll be there." When he finally signed the separation papers, he looked up one last time. "Can I ask you something?" "You can." "Did you ever stop loving me?" I looked through the window at the still lake. "Love doesn't disappear the moment trust does," I said quietly. "I just stopped recognizing the man I fell in love with." He closed his eyes. A tear slipped down his face before he signed his name and pushed the papers back across the table. Neither of us reached for them. Outside, the wind had faded and the lake lay perfectly still. There were no lies left between us anymore. Only consequences. A few days later, Tom met me outside the courthouse with 2 cups of coffee. "You get any sleep?" "About 3 hours. Better than before." How wasn't wrong? The hearing lasted less than 40 minutes. Because we'd already settled everything, the judge focused on making sure we had signed willingly and spent most of her questions on Maddie's parenting plan. "I wish more parents came into this courtroom this prepared," she said before signing the order. "Whatever happened between you, your daughter should never become part of the punishment." She was right. Maddie deserved parents, not enemies. One signature later, 15 years of marriage officially came to an end. Outside the courthouse, Adrian stopped me. "I meant everything I said at the cabin." "I know. I'm sorry." "I know. I'll regret my choices for the rest of my life." Once, those words might have saved us. Now they simply came too late. "I hope you become the kind of father Maddie can always be proud of." His eyes filled again. "I'll try. I believe you." The answer surprised both of us. Then we walked to separate parking lots without looking back. Life didn't slow down just because mine had changed. Monday morning, Mercer Auto Works was already waiting for me with a full schedule. Mrs. Peterson's Honda, a transmission rebuild, 2 state inspections, and a classic Mustang restoration. The work itself was ordinary, and that was exactly what I needed. Customers came in with practical problems. My employees asked ordinary questions, and every engine we repaired reminded me that machines still followed simple rules. Diagnose the problem, fix it, move on. People were never that simple. About 3 weeks later, Janet stopped by the shop carrying a loaf of homemade cinnamon bread wrapped in a towel. "I figured you haven't been cooking much." "I've been trying." She laughed. "It shows." We sat in my office while rain tapped against the windows. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I kept hoping Adrian would come to his senses, so I convinced myself it wasn't my place to interfere." "You finally told me the truth," I said, reaching across the desk to squeeze her hand. "That's what matters." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," she smiled. "You'll always be family." For the first time in months, hearing that word no longer hurt. Vanessa disappeared before Thanksgiving. Rumors spread that she'd listed the dealership for sale and banks were preparing foreclosure proceedings, but I never bothered to verify them. She had never been the real problem. She'd simply walked through a door Adrian chose to leave open. Adrian eventually rented a small townhouse across town. At first, Maddie dreaded visiting him, unsure whether she'd find the confident attorney she remembered or the man trying to rebuild his life. One Sunday, she returned carrying a small wooden birdhouse. "Dad made it." I turned it over in my hands. The corners weren't perfectly square, one nail sat crooked, and the roof leaned slightly. It was imperfect, but it was honest. "He said Grandpa taught him woodworking," Maddie explained. I smiled. "He never told me that." Running my fingers over the rough pine, I realized that rebuilding rarely looked beautiful at first. Sometimes it simply looked like someone finally trying. Winter gave way to spring, the shop stayed busy, and the cabin eventually sold to a retired couple who planned to spend their summers fishing on the lake. I expected to cry when I signed the closing papers. Instead, I felt grateful. Some places belong to old dreams, and letting them go can honor those dreams better than holding on. 6 months after the separation, Maddie surprised me with 2 milkshakes. We sat on the tailgate of an old pickup watching my mechanic's joke across the garage. "They don't just respect you," she said. "They trust you." The word lingered. Trust was easy to lose and painfully difficult to earn back. She leaned against my shoulder. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you hate Dad?" I shook my head. "Hate takes too much energy. I'd rather spend mine living." She stared at her drink before speaking again. I used to think you were trying to embarrass him. And now? I think you were refusing to let him embarrass you. I slipped an arm around her shoulders. I never wanted you caught in the middle. I know. She rested her head against me the way she had when she was little. I think Dad finally understands what he lost. I hope he does, I said, because maybe then he won't lose himself too. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I rolled the restored 1967 Mustang out of Bay 3 6 months earlier. It had arrived rusted, dented, and barely running. Most people saw a car beyond saving. Lou walked over, admiring the fresh black paint. People think restoring a car is about making it look new again, he said. It isn't. What is it about? Making it strong enough to keep going. He patted the roof and headed back inside. I stood alone beside the Mustang, watching the sunset ripple across the polished hood. For a long time, I believed my story was about betrayal. Then I thought it was about revenge. In the end, it was about self-respect. About refusing to let someone else's opinion determine the value of a life built with honest hands. I wasn't the woman Adrian underestimated or the one Vanessa thought she could replace. I was Danielle Mercer, owner of Mercer Auto Works, mother to an incredible daughter, and a woman who had finally learned that protecting her own heart mattered just as much as fixing everyone else's. I turned the key, and the V8 came to life on the first try. Some things never become what they were again. Sometimes they become something stronger.